underway, but we cannot take it for granted. More taxes, more spending and more debt would kill the recovery and take New Zealand backwards. The most important thing for Budget 2025 is to ensure we protect and enhance economic growth. In Thursday's budget, we will do just that.
Good. Well, just for clarity as we continue, answers to questions or supplementary questions should be from a government perspective. Cameron Brewer.
Supplementary. What happens when the government spends more than it raises in revenue?
Well, Mr Speaker, when that happens, the government's books are in deficit and it is borrowing to bridge the gap. Sometimes running a deficit makes sense. But the thing to avoid is a structural deficit, when the deficit is not due to one-off events and not due to the current state of the economy. A structural deficit shows a fundamental mismatch between government spending and revenue that would persist throughout the economic cycle. In 2023, this government inherited a structural deficit, which means higher interest costs and therefore less money to fund public services. For example, the current interest bill on our debt is around $9 billion. For context, members, that is enough to pay for the entire operations of the New Zealand Police, the New Zealand Defence Force, the Justice Department, the Customs Service and the Prison Service combined. Higher debt also constrains the government's ability to respond to a shock, like an earthquake or a severe weather event. Treasury's analysis shows that it's unwise to have government debt over 50% of GDP. I agree with that ceiling, so did Grant Robertson. Others think debt should go higher, then it shouldn't, then it should again. It's hard to keep up. For our part, the government's fiscal strategy is to put net core Crown debt on a downward trajectory towards 40% of GDP. Thursday's budget will show how we intend to achieve that.
The question needs to be answered with some focus on the question.
Supplementary. How will the government fund new initiatives in Budget 2025?
Mr Speaker, Budget 2025 will contain initiatives to support economic growth and invest in the public services Kiwis rely on. The vast bulk of these initiatives will be funded from savings. As in last year's budget, existing areas of spending will be...
That's just unacceptable barrage. It's not an interjection, it's just heckling. It's to stop. Minister may continue.
As in last year's budget, existing areas of spending will be redirected towards higher priorities. Mr Speaker, without these savings, new initiatives would have to be funded from yet more borrowing or by yet more taxes. Either would put New Zealand's economic recovery at risk. Members opposite should consider that carefully. No need to comment on those.
The Honourable Chris Hipkins, question 2.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Prime Minister, does he stand by all of his government statements and actions?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Yes.
Supplementary. Who's correct? The Prime Minister who says the government's decision to unilaterally extinguish 33 active pay equity claims covering hundreds of thousands of low-paid Kiwis, mostly women, saving billions of dollars, was nothing to do with the budget? Or Brooke Van Velden, who told the Council of Trade Unions that the pay equity changes hadn't been a priority for her, but her cabinet colleagues had asked her to bring that work forward?
As the Minister has described before, it's been a focus for the Minister from when we came to government. It's been a series of conversations over the course of the last 18 months. We got to the decision we made last week.
Supplementary question. Why did the government bring forward legislative changes to the pay equity regime, passing them into law immediately before the budget, if not to save money?
Because our primary focus is to fix the mess that we inherited, to make it workable and affordable, and so that we don't have librarians being compared to fisheries officers.
Supplementary question. Will he commit to revealing the impact on the government's accounts of scrapping all 33 existing pay equity claims on budget day? If not, why not?
Well, the first thing I'd say in answer to the member is that all individuals, all unions are encouraged, if they have a pay equity claim, to make a claim under the new laws. But of course, in the course of our budget, we'll be talking about our full fiscal situation on Thursday.
Supplementary question. Why is buying new military equipment no longer budget sensitive, but the cost of a law change Parliament has already passed extinguishing 33 active pay equity claims is still budget sensitive?
The member will be aware from his time in government that there is a series of pre-budget announcements. Not everything is announced in advance of the budget. Everything will be revealed on budget day on Thursday.
Supplementary question. Why does he continue to diminish the value of work being done by low-paid workforces that are dominated by women, arguing that it is somehow wrong to compare the value of their work to work of comparable value undertaken by men?
Well, I just say to that member, there's nothing stopping individuals, unions, making a claim under the new pay equity laws. The way that the member and his party has characterised this is scaremongering, disingenuous. There's a government that backs pay equity, and it's a government that backs equal pay.
Supplementary. Does he agree with teacher aide Jan Mons, who said, quote, "The government have let us know that they really don't value us nor the work that we do"? And if so, how can he justify sidelining frontline women workers like Jan to pay for tax breaks for landlords and tobacco companies?
Well, I reject the characterisation of that question. As teacher aides have already had a pay equity settlement, I just say to the member, the facts of this government are very clear. This is a government that's not getting rid of equal pay. We're not getting rid of collective bargaining. We're not getting rid of pay equity. We're not cutting women's pay. We're not reversing settled pay equity claims. We're making sure we fix up Labor's unworkable and unaffordable program
there's
that
going to be
ended up
no
creating...
further warnings. If people are going to keep up with that barrage, someone will representatively leave the chamber. The Honourable Chris Hipkins. Right Honourable Chris Hipkins.
Does he agree with aged care worker Marianne Bishop, who warned his decision to cut the active pay equity claims, quote, is going to make it harder to recruit and retain staff, end quote, and asked, quote, why would you want to work in aged care when you can get the same amount at a supermarket or McDonald's, end quote? And if so, how does he expect to maintain essential care workers under those kind of conditions?
Well, I would just encourage, as I keep saying in answer to the previous questions, I encourage any individual, any union to make a pay equity claim under the new legislation. We fully expect, sadly, that there will be pay equity claims. The government has put money aside to fund those, and we will continue to support that.
Question 3. Just a minute. When everyone stop having their little cross the house natter, we'll move on. Question 3, Catherine Webb.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Infrastructure. What recent reports has he seen about New Zealand's infrastructure pipeline?
The Honourable Chris Bishop.
Mr Speaker, today the New Zealand Infrastructure Commission released the March 2025 quarterly update. Shows that there is $206.9 billion worth of projects in the pipeline, an increase of nearly $3 billion since the last quarter. Also shows the value of projects in the pipeline with a confirmed funding source has increased by $3.7 billion up to $111.6 billion. The Commission tells me that this year there will be at least $16.6 billion spent across all infrastructure sectors, representing 4% of GDP.
Supplementary. What does the National Infrastructure Pipeline do?
Mr Speaker, the pipeline provides a national view of current and future infrastructure projects, transport, energy, three waters, health, courts, schools, data centres and more. Has information on over 8,000 infrastructure projects that are underway or being planned. There are currently 114 infrastructure providers from central government, local government and the private sector that contribute to the pipeline. There's a few recalcitrant councils that are not yet contributing, and I encourage them to participate so we get them into the pipeline.
Supplementary. Why is the National Infrastructure Pipeline important?
Mr Speaker, some of the feedback that I think all members of Parliament receive around the traps is that it is important to have a public pipeline that is credible. It's good for the sector, including contractors and engineers, helps people plan for major upcoming projects, ensuring they can hire and retain key staff and invest in equipment. Most importantly, a strong pipeline means a growing and more productive economy with more jobs and more opportunities that lifts living standards for all New Zealanders.
Supplementary. What has he done to improve the pipeline?
Mr Speaker, when we came into government, just 30 councils contributed to the pipeline, and members will be aware that councils are, of course, a major contributor to infrastructure around the country, particularly through transport spending. 30 councils is not good enough, so we have encouraged all the councils to participate, and now 64, so that's over double, are now contributing to the pipeline. And as I say, there's 14, I think, that need to lift their game and contribute. We'll be following up with them. We will continue to make further improvements to the pipeline so that all New Zealanders, particularly the sector, have a clear and visible view about the great infrastructure work happening around the country.
Question number 4, Jenny Markov.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Rail and asks, what recent announcements has the government made regarding rail?
The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Budget 2025 allocates $604 million for rail, a sector generating $3.3 billion each year for the economy. This comprises $461 million for the national network and $143 million for Auckland and Wellington metropolitan networks. This is lifeblood economic investment, replacing bridges, culverts, sleepers, rail and all the things that make the network work. Rail is what keeps our coastal ports moving, enabling more ships, which drives exports, imports and trade for an export-dependent nation.
Saving rail.
Supplementary. How does the government's funding commitment support commuters?
The $143 million announced today continues replenishing the busy Auckland and Wellington metropolitan networks. More than 22 million commuters or commuter journeys use the train in Auckland and Wellington, and that figure will rise once the City Rail link opens, widely supported across the House, and when new trains arrive in Wellington. Reliability is what gets people using public transport, and fixing the network underpins the entire metro system. It's all good news.
Supplementary. What rail announcements has the government made for the South Island?
Well, last Friday we officially opened the Hillside workshops in Dunedin, re-energising mechanical engineering and freeing up land for private industrial development. On the same day, the Honourable Shane Jones announced an $8.2 million contribution to Southern Links Logistics. This will build a 3-track rail siding into the venture, enabling road freight to feed the inland hub and rail to take it the distance. This is standard efficient economics around the world, and we are putting our rail system back together again. And let's not forget, the entire South Island will remain connected to rail thanks to our decision to keep rail ferries on the Cook Strait.
Supplementary. Has the Minister seen any reports on light rail?
Well, alarmingly, I did. Last week, we were stunned to see a proposal to build light rail in 3 cities for $11 billion.
Yeah, just point out to the member that you can't use a supplementary to attack opposition parties in the House. I'm sure he can work his way through that.
Well, what suggests I'm attacking anybody at the moment?
No, no.
Are you a mind reader?
I most certainly wasn't. I was just reminding someone, which is not an unreasonable, it's a very polite thing to do.
Well, can I start again? Yes, indeed. Last week we were stunned to see a proposal to build light rail in 3 cities for $11 billion, when Auckland alone would have cost $15 billion at the minimum, and some were saying $30 billion. So, today we have shown what heavyweight rail looks like and contrast sharply with lightweight railers and whalers. If they want an education, pull it to the station.
Very good. We'll go to question 5. The Honourable Barbara Evans.
Mr Speaker, to the Minister of Finance. Does she agree with Honourable Brooke van Velden that, quote, the government under Minister Nicola Willis' pay equity reset suggested that the funded sector would not be funded by the government for pay equity, unquote? If so, how much was set aside in Budget 2024 for the funded sector pay equity claims?
The Honourable Nicola Willis.
Mr Speaker, Minister van Velden's full quote begins with, quote, my understanding is that this may have been information provided maybe a year ago, quote, and I agree that was her understanding when she answered the question. The government last year made a series of decisions, starting with the pay equity reset and through to recent decisions this year, that have removed the assumption that all funded sector claims will always be fully funded by the government. We do expect pay equity claims will be progressed against private sector employers, including some who rely on government funding. Cabinet has agreed that any government contribution towards future costs from funded sector pay equity settlements will no longer come from a specified contingency, but will instead be managed within existing baselines or against future budget operating allowances. In answer to the second part of the question, a contingency was retained in Budget 2024, but I will not be outlining the size of it today or at the budget, because I am advised that to do so could compromise future negotiations. I will be making transparent at the budget the overall sum of pay equity savings returned from various contingencies.
Supplementary. Has any minister sought Cabinet approval to increase their operating baselines due to the change in the pay equity contingency?
Mr. Speaker, no, but I would note that pay equity has been noted as a fiscal risk in Treasury documents for some time, and that will remain the case at this budget.
Supplementary. How is this process fairer when the public has no idea if there is enough money to cover the cost of future claims?
Mr. Speaker, I want to stress that when the member discusses the funded sector, what she is talking about are private sector employers, some of whom are listed profitable entities on the New Zealand Stock Exchange. And what our government does not think is wise is to say to those employers, go to the bargaining table without us, bargain whatever you like, and we'll write you a blank cheque. That was the approach of the last government, and we do not think it is wise.
Supplementary.
Just one more here.
How does this provide assurance to sectors such as hospice nurses who are looking to make a pay equity claim when the criteria has been significantly tightened and they have no idea if their claim will be funded?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would offer any worker in the aged care sector and the sector that the member raises this assurance. If you have a claim based on sex-based discrimination, we encourage you to raise that claim, and it will be judged according to the legal framework. Where that claim relates to sex-based discrimination, settlements will be reached. When it comes to other issues to do with working conditions and pay, issues that arise for every worker in New Zealand, the normal bargaining process will continue.
Supplementary.
Yeah.
Does she agree with the Prime Minister who said, quote, with respect to the funded sector, we'll look at those as they come through case by case, unquote?
I do agree with the Prime Minister, but I find it interesting that that member doesn't seem to agree with her leader's views on debt.
No comment on that.
Supplementary. How is this process clearer when the Minister of Workplace Relations just last week said the funded sector will not be funded? The Prime Minister says it will be on a case-by-case basis, and she won't confirm if there is sufficient money for the funded sector that has been set aside.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I again reiterate the principle I outlined earlier, which is that we do not think it is wise when the government is not at the negotiating table to write a blank cheque for every single private sector employer who may have a pay equity claim raised against them. In fact, what we think would be best is if those employers did pay their workers fairly, and where that doesn't occur and where there is sex-based discrimination, those workers raise claims. And if we are required to give funding to help support those providers meet those settlements, we will consider it on a case-by-case basis, trading it off against all of the other priorities every government faces.
Supplementary, the Honourable David Seymour.
Has she, as Minister of Finance, encountered any circumstances where huge promises were made to the public and there really wasn't any money set aside to pay for them?
Well, in so much as it relates to government activity, that question could be answered, but it cannot be used as an attack on a previous government, as the member knows.
Well, yes, Mr. Speaker, those examples were riddled through the set of government books that this government inherited. And I want to point out, in respect of pay equity, that the last government never made transparent that it was allowing go through to forecast the costs of cabinet decisions that were made to fully fund all private sector claims. That money was never revealed to New Zealanders. That decision was not made transparent or clear, and I'm proud that our government is being far more upfront.
Well, somebody's going to have a lot of time for reading very shortly. Question 6, Sam Uffendale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Health. What recent announcements has he made on delivering new and improved urgent and after-hours services?
Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as part of Budget 2025, Kiwis needing care will benefit from our $164 million funding boost for urgent and after-hours services across the country. Once implemented, our investment will mean that 98% of New Zealanders will be able to receive in-person urgent care within 1 hour's drive of their homes. We're taking action so that Kiwis across the country will have better access to the care they need when they need it, because delivering timely, quality health care is a key priority for this government.
Supplementary. How will this announcement improve access to 24/7 urgent care?
Mr. Speaker, good news. Budget 2025 will support 5 new 24/7 urgent care services identified in counties Manukau, Whangarei, Tauranga, Palmerston North and Dunedin. These new services will help ease pressure on hospitals and keep emergency department wait times down. We know that around 450,000 emergency department attendances each year are considered lower urgency, and many of these patients could be suitable for treatment through urgent care services as an alternative to EDs, helping to reduce pressure on our emergency departments.
Supplementary. What does this announcement mean for other urgent and after-hours services?
Mr. Speaker, around 5,000 New Zealanders visit urgent care clinics every day, but the availability of after-hours services has declined in recent years and access remains variable across the country. That's why this announcement is so important. Funding through Budget 2025 allows us to maintain existing urgent and after-hours healthcare services across the country, whilst also identifying new and extended daytime urgent care services in other provincial towns and cities, benefiting the great people of Lower Hutt, Invercargill, Timaru, and extending hours in other towns up and down the country.
Supplementary. What is the government doing to strengthen our primary care workforce?
Well, Mr. Speaker, to just support this announcement, the government is also focusing on expanding the health workforce in primary care. That's why this investment builds on our primary care announcements made in March. Through that package, we're training more GPs and nurses, providing training pathways for overseas doctors, and funding new incentives to attract and retain staff in primary care. We're delivering 100 clinical placements to overseas trained doctors in primary care, 100 additional doctor training places at our medical schools over the course of this government, up to 50 graduate doctors training in primary care annually, up to 120 training places for nurse practitioners in primary care annually, accelerated tertiary education for up to 120 primary care nurses, and recruitment incentives for up to 400 graduate nurses into primary care each and every year.
Question number 7, the Honourable Jan Tinetti.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister for Workplace Relations and Safety, does she stand by her statement that, quote, the government, under Minister Nicola Willis's pay equity reset, suggested that the funded sector would not be funded by the government for pay equity, unquote? If not, why not?
Mr. Speaker.
Brooke Van Velden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do stand by my full statement in the context it was made, and also my clarification later in the same line of questioning where I said that we will still be funding some of these claims. However, I acknowledge that if the member had put that specific question in writing, she would have received a more nuanced answer. To clear things up, the pay equity reset that I referred to last week included a decision to remove Cabinet's agreement in principle to fund claims in the funded sector. Decisions for the government's role in funding future funded sector claims will be considered on a case-by-case basis.
Was Cabinet informed about whether the government would fund pay equity claims in the funded sector or not?
Mr. Speaker, I refer to my previous answer that this was a discussion that was made
last year, but anything that relates to anything budget sensitive or to do with funding that could be related to this budget is not a question that should be for me. It should be directed to the Minister of Finance.
Is it the case that pay equity claims in the funded sector will now go through the process of having their claim heard without knowing whether the government will actually fund it if successful?
Mr. Speaker, referring to my previous answers, what this government has done is removed the default setting of the previous government that when people are negotiating that the government will fund it. It is true that this decision will be done on a case-by-case basis now.
Who will pay for potentially successful pay equity claims for hospice workers, plunket nurses and early childhood teachers, if not the government?
Mr. Speaker, it will be for the taxpayer and it will be for the private organisations.
Has the government been inconsistent and opaque about the funded sector on purpose to discourage future pay equity claims within that sector?
No, Mr. Speaker, there's a few things to ensure we get across as a government. The pay equity system remains. People can still bring a pay equity claim. What this government has done is remove the default setting that the previous cabinet agreed to, that there would be funding by default for all funded sector claims. That is a decision that was made by this cabinet, which I referred to last week, which the member would have been aware of last year.
When did she become first aware that her statement to the House last week was incorrect?
It is not incorrect. I've simply clarified it for the member.
Takes a lot of clarifying for that member.
Question number 8, the Honourable Marama Davidson.
Ki te Premier, e tautoko ana ia I ngā kōrero me ngā mahi katoa a tōna kāwanatanga.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Yes.
Will his funding boost to urgent care include making services free and publicly delivered to ensure cost is not a barrier to accessing urgent health care?
Well, what we're doing, and I thank the member for their question and raising the investment that the government's putting in to expand urgent care and after-hours services, is that we are making sure that we are targeting our support for children, for young people and those on community services cards. And as part of this process, we want to see a clearer framework on fees overall.
Does he accept that urgent care services can be prohibitively expensive, with one woman in Palmerston North paying $260 just to be seen? And if so, what action will he take to reduce the cost of these services?
Well, the government's putting in $164 million to make sure that we stabilise the existing services so people have access to services when they need them. And importantly, as I said in answer to the first question, we are targeting children, young people and those on community services card, those that are most vulnerable and those that most need it.
Does he accept the view of the Royal College of General Practitioners that there are not enough doctors to staff his urgent care announcements, and if so, will he lift the funding cap to maximise the training placements at Otago and Auckland universities to 889 by the year 2027?
Well, I just say to the member, there have been a series of announcements over the course of this year where we have talked about expanding the number of training places for doctors in our medical schools. I think there will be something like an extra 100 added into our medical schools just over the term of this government. We've also talked about doctors that may have been qualified in overseas jurisdictions and how we can get them working in our GP and our primary care sector as well as massive investments with our nurses to make sure we can get more nurse prescribers and more nurse practitioners working in primary care. I think if the member took a step back and looked at the series of announcements that we've made, you would see that we are doing everything we can to make sure we improve on our healthcare system, which is important.
Will he fund pay parity for the primary care nurses working in urgent care so they are paid the same as Te Whatuora nurses, and if not, why not?
Well, again, our government's putting more money into healthcare than any other government in the history of New Zealand. The Minister of Finance has already foreshadowed that we'll have more money in our budget for healthcare at the budget, and we are doing everything we can to make sure that we put more money in, we hire more doctors and nurses, we have clarity on the targets of what we expect the healthcare system to deliver, and we need to improve the performance of Health New Zealand big time.
The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
If, as it's been claimed, that the average New Zealand household is earning $433 billion a year, why has he got problems with social welfare delivery?
Well, I'm not quite sure how to answer that question, if I'm really honest with you.
The point is you don't have to answer it because it's not about an action the government has taken, nor something the Prime Minister is responsible for.
No, but point of order.
No, point of order.
Mr. Speaker, there was a claim on the weekend exactly saying that, $433 billion per year for the average New Zealand household. Now, around about then, I thought some of our colleagues have missed what's going on, and maybe we've been far too strenuous about social policy delivery in this country.
Well, let me be
now,
clear.
do you want me to table the document?
Well, you can attempt to table any document at any time, but the Prime Minister cannot make a response to something that is clearly an initiative from another party.
I appreciate it.
The Honourable Marama Davidson.
Why would nurses want to work in primary or urgent care when they would get paid more working in our hospitals as a result of the pay gap between Te Whatu Ora and primary care nurses?
Well, again, we have a lot of work to do in our healthcare system, and this is a government that is spending more. It is recruiting more nurses. I think there's been 1,700 more nurses added to our system, 200 more doctors added to our system since we came to power. And importantly, we're making sure that actually our nurses are well paid. They're paid on average, I think, $126,000, including allowances, and that is comparable to what they receive in New South Wales, which is, of course, 30 to 35% wealthier than New Zealand.
Question number 9, Debbie Nauri-Rapaka.
Tēnā koe te pika. My question is to the Prime Minister. Does he stand by all his government statements and actions?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Yes.
Supplementary, please. Does he stand by his own statement that, quote, where we see it, we call it out, in response to being asked about the, quote, Maorification of New Zealand?
Well, I would caution the member that there was a media outlet that interviewed me earlier in the week and has subsequently corrected what it was reported on because it was incorrect. But what I've said to you was particularly on an issue around stop-go signs. We expect stop-go signs to be unambiguous as to what the direction is to motorists because it's about road safety. That's a legitimate thing.
Supplementary. As a Prime Minister, does he have responsibility to, quote, call out divisive rhetoric such as the term, misunderstood or not, modification, instead of enabling it as it is perceived in the interviews?
Well, that's that member's judgment. I disagree with the characterisation of that question.
Supplementary. As Prime Minister, does he believe it is appropriate to challenge the use of te reo, the promotion of tikanga, rather than taking a position of promoting it and supporting it as part of te tiriti obligations?
Well, we have official languages in this country, te reo, New Zealand Sign Language, and of course English, and we support all languages.
Supplementary. What does the term modification mean to the Prime Minister, given he had no issue with answering the questions about it yesterday?
Well, I refuse. Yeah, I don't know what the member's actually asking the question about. I mean, it's not a term that I've used.
Sorry, through the Speaker, I wasn't able to hear that answer.
No, that can be a problem at times. The Prime Minister may wish to make the answer again.
Well, I haven't used the term.
Supplementary. Can he give an example of when his government has proactively sought tikanga Māori advice to guide decision-making in his term of Parliament?
I think we've had very good advice from iwi leaders around the country. I'm thinking particularly in Tairāwhiti, where last Friday we opened up 149 social housing, which is a great collaboration between iwi, government and also business. And that was very good advice.
Prime Minister, you're going to start again and the question will be heard in silence. Now that's the last warning about barracking. I'm going to turn around, see someone participating and they're off for the afternoon. Point of order, Kieran McAnulty.
Don't dispute that at all. I just note that there have been 3 warnings to this House in regards to barracking. However, you've had to intervene on 8 separate occasions to remind ministers not to use questions to have a pop shot at the opposition, and I note there has been no warnings given to them.
Oh, well, if you consider that my raising it so frequently on the first day of the week was not effectively a warning, then you perhaps don't know how I operate. But there is going to be a day where a minister is going to overstep, and that will be the end of their week. The Honourable Prime Minister.
There have been many instances where we take advice from iwi leaders. In particular, I'm thinking of 2. One is with respect to our conversations around the Waikato Tainui Brookfield infrastructure investment, which is an extra $1 billion investment that's come together to explain the Ruakura Super Hub. And the second one that I was alluding to was the outstanding work, the really exciting work where we've seen iwi, government and business come together and collaborate in an awesome way to deliver 149 homes to iwi community, and to be able to speak with those people who are getting their very first homes because of that collaboration. For Minister Potaka, myself and Minister Mitchell was pretty special last week.
Supplementary. Does he accept that his government's decisions, including repealing Te Aka Whai Ora, removing treaty clauses, the Regulatory Standards Bill and unprecedented suspension of Maori MPs, are being seen by many as an attack on Maori visibility?
It's the end of that question. You got that hopelessly wrong. Now, I'll be very generous and give the member one more shot. But you asked the government questions about the government, not about Parliament.
Does he accept that his government's decisions, including repealing Te Aka Whai Ora, removing treaty clauses, introducing the Regulatory Standards Bill, are being seen by many as an attack on Māori visibility and voice?
No, I think Māori, when they see inflation at record, down from 7.2 down to 2.5%, when they see interest rates coming down an extra $300 a fortnight on a $500,000 mortgage over 25 years, and they see a growing economy, and they see iwi doing deals with international infrastructure firms, they understand this is a government that's working hard for Māori and non-Māori, women and men and all New Zealanders.
Point of...
We'll just wait for silence. Point of order, Debbie Nauru-Paka.
Just in respect to the earlier question that was answered in respect to the modification, I just need to clarify, sorry, through the speaker, there's a lot of noise. The Prime Minister has refuted that that interview that has been circulated is incorrect. That's what we heard, isn't it?
No, he said in answer to your question that he didn't use the term.
So point of order.
Sorry, this is not the place to debate that. Right Honourable, sorry, hang on, it's a bit of order. Right Honourable Winston Peters.
But I asked the Prime Minister in the question, the issue of Maorification. Would it be Maorification if every Thursday I went down and got myself a suntan?
No, we're not going to do that. That is one of those questions where I made the point before to the Honourable Kieran McAnulty that at some point some minister is going to overstep and take an early afternoon. So I'd suggest that the Right Honourable Winston Peters remove himself from the House now. Well, you didn't hear what I said earlier, unfortunately, but it's not debatable. Well, that's something that everyone's noticed throughout your career. Willow Jean Prime.
Please?
Sorry?
A new point of order.
You better be a new point of order.
Yeah, I think it is. So what I was getting at is that while I understand that the Prime Minister did not make the comment, he does have a responsibility to the culture of the comment and the answering of it.
Hang on a minute. I'm sorry. You can't ask me to start interpreting your questions for the Prime Minister. It's not a point of order. The Honourable Willow Jean Prime.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education and asks, does she stand by all her statements and actions relating to pay equity?
Mr Speaker, yes, and for the context in which they were made.
Supplementary. Has she received any advice from officials on the potential sex-based undervaluation of secondary school teachers?
The Honourable Erica Stanford.
Mr Speaker, I have received some verbal advice.
No one was speaking and I couldn't hear.
Point of order, the Honourable Kieran McNaught.
I'm terribly sorry, but I don't think the microphone's working, sir. We couldn't hear that.
Well, okay, there's obviously a problem with the microphone. Can someone who's in the booth pick that up and try and sort that out? Why don't we, if the member doesn't mind, we could move to question 11 and you start your question again, if you want. Is that okay?
Oh, while they fix it.
While they fix it.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So we'll go to question 11, Chloe Swarbrick.
Te Premier, e tautoko ana ia I ngā kōrero me ngā mahi katoa a tōna kāwanatanga.
Yes.
What is more responsible, an emissions reduction plan to reduce gross climate-changing emissions or banking a third of your climate plan on unproven technology, as his government has, which the private sector this week tells us is economically unviable?
Sorry, I just missed a part of the question. Can you repeat it?
What is more responsible?
No, hang on, just calm down. It's not that he couldn't hear it. It's just that you are speaking very, very quickly, and perhaps the intention of the question was missed. Just present a little more slowly, if that's okay.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
That's right, for old people like me. Yeah.
What is more responsible? An emissions reduction plan to reduce gross climate-changing emissions, or banking a third of your climate plan on unproven technology, as his government has, which the private sector this week tells us is economically unviable?
Well, as the member knows, we have an emissions reduction plan, 1 and 2. They are on track to deliver our...
No, they're not!
No, look, I'm sorry. An outburst like that is going to see you join Mr Peters in the lobbies. It's just not acceptable. Prime Minister, punishment can be rough sometimes. Prime Minister could start answering that question again.
Well, as the member knows, we are on track to meet our emissions carbon net zero 2050. In fact, under emissions reductions plans 1 and 2, and what we see is the outlook for 3, while there's more work to do, there's even a possibility we could do it 6 years earlier.
Is the Prime Minister telling the House that he is not aware of the fact that the industry, the sector that he is relying on for fully a third of his emissions reduction plan, has come out this past week and said that that technology he is relying on is economically unviable?
I'm aware of lots of comments about our emissions reductions plan. There are things that are in the plan, there are things that are outside the plan. I'm also aware of things like Fonterra's program, which actually we haven't baked fully into the plan. It could be upside. But with respect to carbon storage, we think that's a very legitimate activity.
Can the Prime Minister tell the House exactly how high the carbon price would need to be to make the carbon capture and storage projects commercially viable for the likes of Todd Energy at Kapuni Field?
No, because
point of order, the Honourable Shane Jones.
So I'd ask you to listen very carefully to those questions in the context of Speaker's Ruling 196(2). Questions are expected to be shorn of outlandish claims, descriptions of a reality that is not based in fact. And that leads to disorder, and we've had far too much of it from that particular element of the House.
Well, I'm sorry that you feel that way, and clearly did not intend to reflect on my judgment, but that's the consequence, and that has a pretty big downside as well. Vice Rawbeck asked the question again, but with that in mind, don't make outlandish statements in a question.
If I may respond to the point of order, Mr Speaker.
Well, not really. No,
okay.
Just carry on.
Can the Prime Minister tell the House exactly how high the carbon price would need to be to make the carbon capture and storage technology, the projects mentioned in his emissions reduction plan, commercially viable for the likes of Todd Energy at Kapuni Field?
But you can't expect the Prime Minister to answer a question that is the right domain of Todd Energy. He's responsible for a lot of things, but not for the management of that company.
Mr. Speaker, okay. Does the Prime Minister then accept MB's climate implications of policy assessment, which stated that, and I quote, "The emissions impact of carbon capture and storage is uncertain. It depends on the extent businesses choose to invest to deploy this technology. There are a limited number of businesses within New Zealand where it would be technically and commercially viable to use CCS, given the current cost of this technology."
Well, look, I mean, there'll be lots of different technologies that come along our way, as there have been in the last 10 years, as there will be in the next 10 years. Each of them will have a different set of cost parameters and economic viability parameters. And, you know, we've got a plan at the moment, I just reassure the member, that is putting us on track to deliver for net zero 2050. That's a good thing.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, the Honourable David Seymour.
Does the Prime Minister believe that innovation can lead to better technology with lower cost, and sometimes people even do this innovation because of profit?
I agree. I think the profit motive is a good one to drive innovation, and actually what we need in this country is more innovation to deliver on our climate objectives, not bankruptcy of farmers.
Does the Prime Minister then reject the statements that we have heard on the public record from the sector involved in carbon capture and storage this week, which his government's emissions reduction plan relies on for fully a third of its reduction? Does he reject their statements that this technology is currently economically unfeasible?
I can't talk for an individual company,
That's
but what I can say to the member is that we have a plan.
That's it. You can't ask a question. It's like asking him questions about any old thing at all that he's got no responsibility for. He's not responsible for what they think. He's responsible for government actions. You could have asked that question a different way. Perhaps you should try.
If the government can act with urgency to cut off 33 active pay equity claims and make it easier to kill our native wildlife...
No, sorry, you can't do that either. That question is concluded. Question 12, Dana Kirkpatrick.
Oh.
I'm sorry. We go back to the Honourable Willow Jean Prime.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Education. Does she stand by all her statements and actions relating to pay equity?
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Erica Stanford speaking into the mic would be a good idea.
I was. It's working now. Mr. Speaker, yes, in the context in which they were made.
Supplementary. Has she received any advice from officials on the potential sex-based undervaluation of secondary school teachers?
Mr. Speaker, I've had a range of verbal advice.
Now, look,
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Sorry, the microphone's been turned up to max. You're going to have to speak more into the microphone. I couldn't even hear that.
Mr. Speaker, I have had a range of verbal advice from my officials.
What was the advice?
Mr. Speaker, the advice was that for teachers especially, the situation is somewhat complicated. The unified pay scale makes the situation more complicated, and the advice was that claims may be raised and would be worked through.
Supplementary. Has she received any advice on the cost to settle the now discontinued pay equity claim for secondary school teachers?
Mr. Speaker, no.
Has she received any advice on the cost to settle the now discontinued pay equity claim for primary school teachers and support staff in residential schools?
Mr. Speaker, no.
Was the Minister made aware that secondary school teachers will not be able to make a claim under the new rules prior to the changes being made?
Mr. Speaker, I knew, because I understand the ratios of female to male employees in secondary and primary, and I knew that when we were discussing raising the rate, that might have an impact for secondary school teachers.
The member's used up all the allocation of questions. Can I thank the member for assisting in while we fix up that technical issue. Question 12, Dana Kirkpatrick.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Associate Minister of Housing. What recent announcements has he made about building social housing?
Good question.
The Honourable Tama Potaka.
It's Maori. This government is committed to the delivery of more affordable homes in partnership with local communities, including iwi and Maori providers. Last week, along with the Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Christopher Luxon, and the Honourable Mark Mitchell, we announced a new partnership with Tairāwhiti iwi collective Toitū Tairāwhiti to fund Toitū nearly $50 million to deliver 150 new affordable rentals next to the Gisborne Hospital. This marks a significant milestone in the government's commitment to partnering to deliver better housing outcomes alongside iwi and Māori tino tautoko te kāwanatanga I ēnei momo mahi.
Supplementary. Why is the government partnering in iwi-led housing solutions?
E te maunga o te whare. Projects like this Gisborne development to build in areas with significant housing needs like Te Tairāwhiti should be led by credible and competent groups who know their communities best, and that local leadership is what makes these solutions enduring. This partnership mahi with Toitū Tairāwhiti demonstrates confidence in iwi capability and experience, and the government is investing in improving solutions where Māori are not just at the table. Māori organisations are designing and delivering the homes and manaakitanga support their people genuine lead in places where they need it.
What are the outcomes for whānau from this mahi?
Te maunga o te whare. Affordable, warm and secure housing is foundation to improving whānau outcomes, particularly those who are in emergency housing and other difficult circumstances. This project will enable up to 150 whānau, with some focus on single mothers with young tamariki, to access affordable, quality homes, reducing housing stress and addressing overcrowding. The homes will be developed with wraparound manaakitanga in mind. The kaupapa Māori approach of Toitū Tairāwhiti ensures that whānau are supported not just with housing, but with access to tautoko that improves health, tinana body, hinengaro mind, education and employment outcomes. That's the value of a credible iwi and Māori-led solution.
Supplementary. What will this project do to support the local economy?
E te maunga o te whare. The project continues support and tautoko for long-term jobs and regional economic resilience. Homes will be constructed in tūranga, meaning more local jobs across planning, civil works and construction phases. It will also provide contracting opportunities for Māori tradespersons and small and medium enterprises, helping to grow the regional economy and enhancing construction capacity to support the 5 East Coast marae who are receiving funding to rebuild their facilities after last week's additional announcement regarding recovery from cyclones Gabrielle and Hale.
Excellent.
That concludes oral questions. Members, I've received a letter from Kahurangi Kata seeking to debate Understanding Order 399, the findings in the report of the Controller and Auditor General Oranga Tamariki inquiry into procurement and contract management. There is no ministerial responsibility for reports of an Officer of Parliament. The Speaker is deemed responsible for them. Speaker's ruling 2181-4. However, where a report from an Officer of Parliament deals with a matter for which the government is responsible, speakers have allowed urgent debates. Generally, that has been where the government has announced a response to the report. No substantive government action in response to the report has been indicated in the member's application. While the issue is an important one, it doesn't reach the standard for urgency required to warrant the setting aside of the business of the House today. The application is declined. I also received a letter from the Honourable Willow Jean Prime on the same matter, and for the same reasons the application is declined. Members, we come to the consideration of the report of the Privileges Committee, and I refer members to the statement I made on May 15 about this debate, which dealt with the standing orders surrounding it, although some media outlets seem to misunderstand that. The committee's recommendation to impose penalties would represent a significant development in the practice of the House. A proper opportunity for debate must be provided before the House arrives at a decision. The debate on this matter should be civil, as should any debate in this House. While members may criticise each other, this should not amount to personal reflection or attacks. Members should constrain their speeches to relevant points, avoid repetition and discreditable references. Failure to do so will see the termination of members' speeches. I invite the Chairperson of the Privileges Committee to move a motion that reflects the recommendations of the committee. The Honourable Judith Collins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I move that Hana Rafferty Maipi Clark be suspended from the House for 7 days for acting in a manner that could have the effect of intimidating a member of the House in the discharge of their duty, and that Debbie Ngarewa-Packer be severely censured by the House and suspended from the service of the House for 21 days for acting in a manner that could have the effect of intimidating a member of the House in the discharge of their duty, and that Rauri Waititi be severely censured by the House and suspended from the service of the House for 21 days for acting in a manner that could have the effect of intimidating a member of the House in the discharge of their duty. These recommendations follow the Speaker's ruling on 10 December 2024 that a question of privilege arose from the actions of the Honourable Penny Henry, Hana Rafiti Maipi Clark, Debbie Ngarewa-Packer and Rauri Waititi, following the first reading debate on the principles of the Treaty Waitangi Bill on 14 November 2024. At the conclusion of that debate and during the vote, the 4 members left their seats to perform the haka, and 3 of the members advanced towards the seats of another party, something the Speaker has ruled cannot be considered anything other than disorderly. All 4 MPs were referred to the Privileges Committee and subsequently invited to appear before it. Mr Henry did so, and he accepted he should not have left his seat. The committee recommended he apologise to the House for acting in a disorderly manner that disrupted a vote being taken and impeded the House in its functions, and he unreservedly did so on 25 March 2025. However, the 3 other MPs declined to appear before the committee, ostensibly because the committee rejected their request to appear together rather than individually, while clarifying that each member would be able to attend in the public gallery. The committee wanted them to appear individually as it considered that would be of most assistance to it in considering the question of privilege. It especially wanted to clarify whether there was any premeditation behind the actions, given Ms Maipi Clark told media Mr Waititi was supposed to rip up the bill and start the haka, but instead handed it to her to do so. The committee sought to arrange hearings twice more, but the members declined each opportunity. We have therefore had to consider this matter based on observations on 14 November, including video footage. This footage clearly shows Ms Maipi Clark casting her party's vote before proceeding to rip up the bill and start a haka. The Speaker can be heard saying, "No, don't do that," before rising to his feet. However, a number of opposition party members then rose to their feet and joined Ms Maipi Clark in performing the haka, with Ms Maipi Clark, Mr Henry, Ms Ngarewa-Packer and Mr Waititi leaving their seats. Ms Maipi Clark, Ms Ngarewa-Packer and Mr Waititi moved across the chamber floor to face members of the ACT Party, who were seated at their desks. Ms Ngarewa-Packer approached the front of the ACT Party desks and, while performing the haka, pointed at ACT Party members using a hand gesture similar to a finger gun. At the conclusion of the haka, Ms Ngarewa-Packer repeated the gesture and, simulating a firing motion, said "e noho," or sit down. The Speaker suspended the sitting of the House. When the House resumed nearly 30 minutes later, the Speaker ruled that Ms Maipi Clark's conduct was, quote, appallingly disrespectful and, quote, grossly disorderly. He moved that Ms Maipi Clark be suspended from the House, and the motion was agreed to. Based on our review of the video footage, we consider that the facts of the matter are clear and occurred as I've already outlined. We invited Ms Maipi Clark, Ms Ngarewa-Packer and Mr Waititi to provide written evidence, and they jointly responded, saying in essence that their actions were an expression of tikanga, upholding the values and obligations of Te Tiriti o Waitangi and their tēnā rangatiratanga. One of their arguments was that tikanga Maori and haka were not matters for the Privileges Committee to consider. On this, the committee agrees with them. It is not there to set or debate the rules of Parliament, but rather to uphold the rules as they are, not as some people may wish them to be. To be clear, the haka is not banned in the House. However, the rules of Parliament, the standing orders under which it operates, state permission has first to be obtained from the Speaker, that any actions must not impede the business of the House. No such permission was sought for the 14 November haka, and it most certainly did impede the business of the House as it was carried out during a vote. The ensuing chaos led to the Speaker suspending the House for nearly 30 minutes. So here we are at the crux of the matter. It is not about haka. It is not about tikanga. It is not about the Treaty of Waitangi. It is about following the rules of Parliament that we are all obliged to follow and that we all pledge to follow. It does not matter our gender, our ethnicity or our beliefs. In this House, we are all simply members of Parliament, and like any institution, it has rules. Standing orders already include severe penalties for people who break the rules without the requirement to even go to the Privileges Committee. For example, any member who is suspended under Standing Order 92 that subsequently refuses to obey the Speaker's direction to leave the chamber can be suspended from the House for the remainder of the calendar year without further question. I'm quoting from Standing Order 95 for the avoidance of doubt. In this instance, the Speaker referred the matter to the Privileges Committee, which subsequently carried out a thorough inquiry over 6 months before coming to a majority decision. Make no mistake, this was a very serious incident, the likes of which I have never before seen in my 23 years in this debating chamber. I am a robust debater, as many of you will know, but I follow the rules of this institution and I am a proud member of it, and I appreciate and accept that my views are not those of all in this House. And that is why we are the House of Representatives. We cannot bring this House into disrepute by ignoring those rules, especially if the results in other members being intimidated. And that is exactly what happened on November 14, 2024. The behaviour of Ms Maipi Clark, Ms Ngare Wapaka and Mr Waititi was such that it could have the effect of intimidating other members of the House acting to discharge their duties. It is highly disorderly for members to interrupt a vote while it is being conducted. The right to cast one's vote without impediment goes to the heart of being a Member of Parliament. It is not acceptable to physically approach another member on the floor of the debating chamber. It is particularly unacceptable for Ms Ngare Wapaka to appear to simulate firing a gun at another Member of Parliament. We are therefore, by majority, find all 3 members have each committed a contempt of the House and are recommending the penalties as I have already laid out. After 6 months of meetings and hearings, which all committee members participated in a professional manner and with civility, it is disappointing to now hear personal attacks and allegations of racism. I utterly reject that. We have simply done our job. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
The Right Honourable Chris Hipkins.
Mr Speaker, I move that all the words after the first instance of that be replaced with Hana Rafiti Maipi Clark, Debbie Ngare Wapaka and Rawiri Waititi be censured by the House for acting in a manner that could have the effect of intimidating a member of the House in the discharge of their duty, and that Debbie Ngare Wapaka and Rawiri Waititi be suspended from the service of the House for 24 hours, to take effect on the first sitting day following the conclusion of the budget debate, and that Hana Rafiti Maipi Clark face no further sanction, having already served a period of suspension. Mr Speaker, this is a serious matter. Deliberately disrupting the business of the House is serious. Interrupting a vote of Parliament is serious. And I would say to the Maori Party that when you interrupt a vote of the House, you're not just interrupting the votes of those who are voting in favour, you're interrupting the votes of those who are voting against something as well. And all members of the House deserve to have their votes recorded, and when members deliberately disrupt the House, there should be some sanction for doing so. Mr Speaker, it is never okay to intimidate another member of the House, but the sanction being proposed by the Parliamentary Privileges Committee is totally out of line with existing parliamentary practice and is disproportionate to the allegations that have been posed. Mr Speaker, let's be clear about what the Maori Party are not being sanctioned for. They are not being sanctioned for doing a haka, because haka have been performed in this House and that is acceptable. They are also not being sanctioned for refusing to appear before the Privileges Committee, because that is completely legitimate as well. No one is obliged to appear before the Privileges Committee, and the Maori Party chose not to, and that is their right, and they should not be sanctioned for that. They are being sanctioned because they broke the rules of the House, they behaved in a disorderly manner, they interrupted a vote of the Parliament, and there should be a sanction for that. But we have never seen a sanction of this nature in New Zealand's history before. We've had members undertaking fist fights in the lobbies, and they were not suspended at all. We've had members driving tractors and Land Rovers up the front steps of Parliament, and they were not sanctioned. We have had a recent case where a member left their chair, walked to the other side of the House, stood over a member, thumped the table, and they were not sanctioned by the House. We've had a recent instance in this term of Parliament where a member was prevented from leaving a select committee because another member was standing over them, and they were not sanctioned by this House. And yet, Mr. Speaker, we seem to have gone from a situation where members were not sanctioned to one where a 21-day sanction, the harshest by a factor of 7, is being applied to these members. It is disproportionate. A sanction is appropriate. This level of sanction simply is not. I draw on the advice that was provided by the Clerk of the House to the committee. The Clerk's job is to provide advice to the Parliament on its proceedings in a way that is not political, that upholds the traditions and the conventions of this House. And the Clerk made the advice clear that suspension of members is a rare occurrence, and a long period of suspension would represent a substantial change in the House's practice. Let's be clear, the recommendation of the Privileges Committee is exactly that. The Clerk further advised that the committee ought to recommend a long suspension only with the broad support of members, not simply a bare majority. That has not happened in this case. The Clerk also advised that the committee should clearly set out its rationale in arriving at the particular penalty so that a consistent approach could be followed in the future. I've read the report several times. There is no rationale. There is no criteria that could be followed in the future. This is an arbitrary number plucked out of thin air. How can that possibly stand in this Parliament? Why did we choose a 24-hour suspension? It's quite simple, Mr. Speaker, because it's already in the standing orders. That's right. Had you as Speaker named those members at the time, given this is the first instance in which they had been named, they would have been suspended for 24 hours, as one of the members was. If they did it again, they'd be suspended for 7 days, and if they did it again, they'd be suspended for 28 days. Those are the existing rules of the House. The Privileges Committee is departing from the well-established practice of this House in its recommendations, and the sanction they are proposing is totally disproportionate. It is wrong and against the traditions of our democracy for a government to use its majority in Parliament to suspend and remove from the service of the people of New Zealand its political opponents. Yeah. The reason the Clerk advised that the committee should seek near unanimity on this matter is because of exactly that. Other parliaments around the world have seen members of the opposition suspended by the government, and we, in many cases, have criticised them for doing that. What moral authority will we have to do that again in the future if this House engages in exactly the practice we've criticised other countries for doing? Mr. Speaker, I am not defending the Maori Party, and I'm not saying that their actions should be without sanction. They should be. The motion that we have put forward would see them sanctioned in line with the previous practice of this House, and that would be appropriate. Departing from that and imposing the harshest sanction the New Zealand Parliament ever would have imposed would be wrong. Mr. Speaker, I was absolutely shocked to learn that a member of the Privileges Committee asked about the committee's supposed power to imprison a member of the House. That happens in tin pot dictatorships and banana republics. No member of this House should be inquiring about whether they can imprison a member of their opposition. It is undemocratic and it is wrong, and the fact that the question was even asked is a stain on this House. Respect for democracy means respecting the rights of all members of Parliament who are elected by their people to represent them in this House. Taking away that right should be only after a very, very high threshold has been met. The government haven't even articulated what that threshold should be. If they are going to impose the harshest sentence ever recommended by the Privileges Committee, they should be very clear on what the criteria were that they weighed that against, and they have not done that. They should be very clear on what the future criteria for this nature of sentence, if you like, should be, and they have not done that either. They are accusing one party of breaking the rules of Parliament, which I happen to agree they did, whilst also not following the rules themselves. Any moral authority they want to claim here has been severely diminished by the fact that they themselves are not following the existing rules of the House. The sanctions that this House imposes are set in the standing orders. 24 hours, 7 days, 28 days in that order. And the Privileges Committee have not followed that. But Mr. Speaker, the last point I want to make is perhaps the most important of all. Looking around the world, and I say this to all members on all sides of the House, looking around the world, democracy is quite literally hanging by a thread. Days like today hold a razor blade up to that thread. When people around the country look at this House and say, why should I have any faith in the institutions of democracy? This is a very good example of why. Parliament spending more time talking about itself than talking about the issues that matter to them. And before the opposition members go, or before the government members go, the opposition have a choice, the government scheduled this debate for today. They had that choice. The government recommended a penalty that is harsher than any the Parliament has ever imposed before, and that was their choice. The government chose to impose that penalty by majority rather than seeking consensus, as the Privileges Committee has almost always done in the past, and that was their choice. They have brought this before the House today, and they have made that choice, and it should be subject to scrutiny. What they're doing today is wrong, Mr. Speaker. Imposing a penalty that removes 3 members of the House during budget week, preventing them participating in one of the 2 occasions the opposition has in a year to vote no confidence in the government, is simply wrong. This is not a tin pot dictatorship or a banana republic. We should stand up for the values of democracy, even when they are inconvenient, even when people are saying things that we disagree with. That is not what the government are doing today.
The Honourable Chris Bishop. We go from side to side in the House. Honourable Chris Bishop.
I move that this debate be now adjourned to Thursday, 5 June 2025.
A point of order?
Mr. Speaker, this particular debate infringes upon potentially infringes upon the rights of individual members. I think it's not unreasonable to ask where the government is moving such an adjournment, to ask them why they are doing so. This questions members' ability to participate in the House.
You've made your point of order, and I don't have to, but I will seek some degree of specificity about the reason for the adjournment. The motion.
Mr. Speaker, the government has come to the view that given the centrality of the budget process to Parliament, it would be appropriate for the Pati Maori members who may or may not be suspended following the conclusion of the consideration of the substantive motion to participate in the budget. There is no more important role for Parliament than scrutinising and debating the budget. It is a confidence motion by definition in the government. The government cannot govern without the approval of the Parliament. Constitutionally, it is right that they participate, so we are moving to adjourn the debate so that this week can focus rightly on the budget and the details of it, rather than this issue, which has occupied far too much of Parliament's time already. So the motion reads that the debate be now adjourned to Thursday, 5 June
Well, just
2025, which is the next sitting.
Before you do that, you may have to do that again. I'll call you again to do that. I need to make it clear that the question is that the amendment to the motion is agreed to. The Honourable Chris Bishop. No, it's procedural. Mr Hipkins has moved an amendment. I'm just saying that's what we now debate. You may now move whatever you want to.
Mr Speaker, that this is an adjournment motion,
That's
which
right.
is technically non-debatable.
Yeah, I know it is. Like, hang on a minute, people. Just get a bit calm here. All I've said is that following Mr Hipkins' speech, I should have said to Parliament that the question is that the amendment to the motion now be agreed to. You then have stood up and said that you move an adjournment, right? And so the question is that the motion be agreed to. Those in favour will say aye. Aye. I'm in the middle of a vote. I'm putting the motion to adjourn the House. Look, I was clarifying.
He hasn't moved it yet.
The what? Adjourn the debate, sorry, yeah.
I have.
He has moved it.
I have, I said it.
He's moved it twice, actually. No. Look, don't... look, I know this is charged. It's a little unexpected. Certainly not what I expected. And I would just suggest don't trifle with the chair today, because I'm sick of that.
Fair enough, Mr Speaker. But I just want to point out this affects members' ability to participate in the House. And the effect of the motion that Chris Bishop has just moved potentially removes the ability of the Maori Party to vote on the budget. Because the budget will not be voted on. The budget will not be voted on until after the 5th of June. If the motion had passed today for 21 days, it's possible that by the time the vote for the budget came up, that they would be back in the House and being able to vote.
I've listened enough. The member quoted in his speech, referenced in his speech, standing orders frequently during his speech. He will therefore know that under Standing Order 134, given that there is a motion on the House to suspend the debate, I have no ability other than to accept it and put it to the House. The question is that the motion is agreed to. Those in favour will say aye. Aye. To the contrary will say no. Aye. The ayes have it. A party vote is called for. The clerk will conduct a party vote. We don't speak at all while there is a vote in progress. So anybody who thinks they're moving, just sit still for a minute and be quiet. The clerk will conduct the party vote.
New Zealand National.
49 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes opposed.
Green Party of Aotearoa New Zealand.
15 votes opposed.
ACT New Zealand.
11 votes in favour.
New Zealand
8
First.
votes in favour.
Te Pati Maori.
6 votes opposed.
The ayes are 68, the noes are 55. The motion is agreed. The debate is adjourned. I call on Government Order Notice of Motion number 1.
Employment Relations Pay Deduction for Partial Strikes Amendment Bill. Interrupted debate on second reading.
I call on the Green Party. Have a call on this debate. I'll call on Tiano.
Kia ora, Mr Speaker. What a surprise it is to be speaking on this bill right at this particular point in time, Mr Speaker. So I will be doing my best to talk to this bill, very important bill. And I want to start to talk about this bill and talk about it in the context of what has been happening via the government's agenda and the attacks on workers' rights, Mr Speaker. We had just very recently the cancelling of 33 pay equity claims, Mr Speaker. Just another example of the lack of care the lack of compassion for workers in our country, Mr. Speaker. For many of us who were actually waiting for the legislation to hit the desks, it showed up just after question time. So we knew something was happening. We knew that there was an urgent bill showing up in the House, but we didn't actually have the very, very specific details until it hit that desk, despite the government and the Minister, Brooke Van Velden, going down to the tiles and crowing that they had actually saved this government's budget. And we have a difference of opinion across the government parties on whether it was they support pay equity and equal pay, and we all should be doing that. But when we have ministers of the Crown saying, actually, this is what we're going to do, this is the priorities that this government has, that they will prioritise 12 billion and climbing on defence spending, that they will prioritise tax cuts for landlords over the low-paid women workers, those industries where you have predominantly women workers, Mr. Speaker, it is a shame. And this bill is another example of that. This bill is another example of that. This is the partial strikes bill, Mr. Speaker. And for people that out there who don't know what the partial strikes is,
just checking that's working all right. If you guys don't know, at the moment, I am currently in a garage. I don't have a proper setup, so I won't have my face right now. But I will end it there because obviously that debate didn't go anywhere. We're going to have to wait at least 2 weeks, which is a pain in the ass. It's anticlimactic. Government pussied out. Honestly, I understand why they did it. I'm not overly fussed, to be honest, but it was an anticlimactic. I wasn't able to sit here and watch it. Anyhow, hope you all have a lovely evening. Good rest of the week. I've got a new video dropping at 5 p.m. tonight. That'll be talking about the Green Party's budget and how it's an absolute socialist fantasy. So feel free to go and take a look at that. Honestly, their numbers are something out of a nightmare. So yes, have a lovely evening, everybody, and I will catch you again very soon.